The general rule, I'd say try to talk for around 20 seconds for each answer. That's the equivalent of about 2 to 3 written sentences. Try to add more information to your response, such as giving an example or a reason to explain your answer. Also, make sure your answers have complete sentences. Don't just give single-word answers. Finally, there are no right or wrong answers to the questions, but what you say should answer the question. Now it's time for you to try part 1. I'm going to ask you one set of questions, and you'll have 20 seconds to answer each. And to get the most out of today's practice test, I recommend you record your answers so you can go back and check how you went. Okay, ready? Here we go. Let's talk about television. What kinds of television programs do you like watching? Did you like the same kinds of TV programs when you were young? What types of television programs are most popular in your country? Is there anything you don't like about watching TV? How did you go? The topic was quite straightforward. Remember that you're likely to be familiar with the topics in part 1, so you should be able to respond easily from your own personal experiences and knowledge. If you want to practice with test-like conditions, head to e2language.com, and included in a range of our premium IELTS test prep courses are speaking assessments and mock tests. Okay, let's see how I'd answer these questions. Notice how I will extend my answers by giving extra information. Also listen for some of the different words and grammar structures I use to show my range and skills. First question, what kinds of television programs do you like watching? I'm really into documentaries, especially ones about history or true crime. I love getting drawn into real-life stories, and I suppose they're a great way to learn something without feeling like you're studying. That said, sometimes I just want to switch off, so I'll watch a good comedy or a lighthearted series. Second question, did you like the same kinds of TV programs when you were young? Not really. As a kid, I was all about cartoons and adventure shows, programs that were fun and fast-paced. I wasn't into anything too serious, but as I got older, my tastes changed. I started enjoying more thought-provoking stuff like dramas and documentaries. I guess it just comes with growing up. Third question, what types of television programs are most popular in your country? Well, reality TV shows seem to be extremely popular. People love those based on competitions, things like cooking contests or talent shows, and of course, dramas are huge, especially ones with gripping storylines. But I'd also have to say that streaming services have changed things a lot, so now people want a mix of both international and local productions. Fourth question, is there anything you don't like about watching TV? Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest downside is how addictive it can be. It's so easy to say, just one more episode, and suddenly you've wasted hours. Also, some shows feel a bit repetitive, like they have the same plot lines just recycled. And of course, the ads can be really interruptive and annoying. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of these Part 1 questions. Now let's move on to speaking Part 2. In Part 2, you're given a topic and asked to talk about it for between 1 and 2 minutes. You have some time to prepare before you start speaking. For this part, the examiner gives you a task card which tells you the topic and has suggested points you should talk about in relation to the topic. Broadly speaking, the topic is going to be about either a thing, a person, a place, an event, or an activity. You have 1 minute preparation time, and you can take notes to help you remember and organize what you want to say. Then you need to speak for between 1 and 2 minutes. Shortly, you're going to have a chance to practice a sample Part 2 speaking test. Before that, here's a few tips to think about. First, it's really important to use your 1 minute preparation time well. In this 1 minute prep time, you need to quickly read the topic and suggested points and take a few short notes. Don't try to write sentences or even detailed notes. There is not enough time. Just note down 1 or 2 words for each suggested point to help you stay focused when talking. Make sure you speak for the full 2 minutes. Think about ways you can add extra information to what you're saying. You might give reasons, explanations, or additional details. Also, remember to think about your fluency, using a range of vocabulary that relates to the topic, using a range of grammar structures and sentence types, and showing good pronunciation. Okay, so now it's time for you to practice Part 2. Make sure you have a pen and paper and a recording device to record your speaking. Are you ready? Here we go. Now I'm going to give you a topic and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you speak, you'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say. You can make some notes if you wish. Please use a pen and paper for your notes, and here's your topic. I'd like you to describe a time where you enjoyed sharing a meal with a friend. You now have 2 minutes for this. Can you start speaking now, please? Thank you. How was that? Did you manage to make a few notes in the 1-minute prep time? It goes quickly, right? And did you manage to speak for the full 2 minutes? Let me show you how I would answer this Part 2 task. During the prep time, with only enough time to write a few words, this is what I would write. For who, I'd jot down the name, in this case my friend Alex. For where, we ate in a Chinese restaurant. What we ate was a vegetarian hot pot. Notice the use of abbreviation here. That's a good trick for writing notes quickly. And why I enjoyed it, well, I hadn't seen Alex in 3 years, so it was a chance to reconnect and reminisce. Notice I'm noting some strong vocab here. And I also enjoyed it because it showed our friendship is still strong. And now I'll give my full response. Listen for my use of vocabulary and grammar structures, how I develop the topic and link my ideas, and my pronunciation. I'm going to talk about a time when I really enjoyed sharing a meal with a friend. It happened about a year ago when I met up with my old friend Alex. We'd been close in university, but after graduating, life got busy and we lost touch. In fact, it had been almost 3 years since we'd last seen each other, so we decided to catch up over dinner. We chose a cozy Chinese restaurant in the city that specialized in hot pot. It was a great choice because hot pot is such a social meal. You sit around a steaming pot, cooking your own food, and it naturally creates conversation. The atmosphere in the restaurant was warm and lively, with the sound of bubbling broth and people chatting all around us. We ordered a vegetarian hot pot, which was perfect because Alex is vegetarian. There was a huge variety of fresh ingredients: mushrooms, tofu, leafy greens, and noodles. I remember the spicy broth being absolutely delicious, and we kept adding more ingredients as we talked. The whole experience felt interactive, which made the meal even more enjoyable. What made the evening truly special was the chance for Alex and me to reconnect. We reminisced about our university days, shared stories about what we'd been up to, and laughed a lot. I felt like no time had passed at all. Even though we'd been apart for so long, our friendship was still as strong as ever. Since that night, we've stayed in touch more regularly, and we're actually planning another dinner soon. I think meals like this bring people together, not just for the food, but for the memories they create. Obviously, the content of your response will be quite different to mine, but you can see that I managed to talk for the full 2 minutes by developing my ideas. I used a variety of appropriate vocabulary and grammar structures, and hopefully I sounded fluent with good pronunciation. If you can do those things too, you'll do really well in this part. For more information on IELTS speaking scoring, head to e2language.com, and included in a range of IELTS test prep courses are methods videos that go into detail on all aspects of IELTS speaking band descriptors. Now it's time for Part 3. Part 3 is where you have a discussion with the examiner. The examiner is going to ask you questions on 1 or 2 different topics that have some connection to what you just talked about in Part 2. The questions you're asked in this section are more complex than the ones you're asked in Part 1 of the test. Your answers are likely to be a bit longer too, so this is where you can give more detailed responses to questions. Instead of giving more factual information like you're asked for in Part 1, Part 3 questions ask you to respond in a more abstract way. For example, they may require you to justify an opinion, evaluate changes over time, speculate, assess the importance of something, compare and contrast, and so on. In Part 3, you should speak from a more general and objective perspective. So for example, rather than talk about what you like, you should talk about what most people in your country like. The examiner will ask from 2 sets of questions, and this part of the test will take about 4 to 5 minutes. As with the other 2 parts of the speaking test, you'll be assessed on your fluency and coherence, your range of vocabulary and grammar structures, and your pronunciation. Remember, Part 3 is about answering in a more general but in-depth way, so you need to make sure your responses are well developed. Here are my top tips for speaking Part 3. Aim for between 20 and 40 seconds per answer. To develop your answers, think about giving what we call a 3-step answer to each question. For step 1, you should state your position, such as saying, I agree, I disagree, yes, no, or I think. In step 2, you can give a reason, explanation, outcome, and so on that supports your position. And then step 3 is where you can give an example. Even though there are no right or wrong answers, it's important you listen carefully to the questions because you need to make sure you're answering the actual question that you're being asked. And don't forget, your answers should be general and objective, so avoid giving personal answers and information. Okay, so now it's time for you to practice this part. I'm going to ask you one set of Part 3 questions, and you'll have time to answer. Remember to record your answers so you can go back and check how you went. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. We've been talking about a meal you enjoyed, and I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, changes in eating habits. How have eating habits changed over the past few decades? Do you think fast food culture has affected the tradition of sharing meals? In what ways do people's eating habits differ between younger and older generations? How did you go with these questions? To help you evaluate, you can compare your responses to how I respond. Listen for whether I answer the questions in a general way and whether I develop my answers. First question, how have eating habits changed over the past few decades? Well, eating habits have changed dramatically over the last few decades. People used to cook at home more often, but now, with busy lifestyles, there's a shift towards convenience, which means people are eating more ready meals, takeaways, and eating out more. There's also been a big rise in health-conscious eating. You see more organic food, plant-based diets, and people cutting down on sugar. In saying that, ultra-processed foods are also more common than ever. For example, in many cities, you'll find fast food joints on every street corner, which wasn't really the case 30 years ago. If this trend continues, we might see even more health-related problems in the future. Second question, do you think fast food culture has affected the tradition of sharing meals? Yeah, I think so. Fast food has made eating more individualistic. People often grab a burger on the go instead of sitting down for a proper meal. Traditionally, meals were a social event, especially in cultures where family dinners were important. But now, with things like food delivery apps, People eat at different times in front of screens or even alone, even when they're in the same home. This kind of change is a bit of a shame and could have quite negative consequences on family dynamics especially. Third question, in what ways do people's eating habits differ between younger and older generations? There's definitely a contrast. Older generations tend to prefer home-cooked meals and traditional recipes, while younger people experiment more with different cuisines like Persian and Sri Lankan food or fusion food. Plus, young people often eat on the move, relying on fast food or meal prep services, whereas older people usually sit down for meals. Another big difference is social media. Young people are influenced by food trends online like superfoods or veganism. But one thing's for sure, both groups seem to be becoming more aware of the importance of nutrition for general health, which is a good thing for society overall. Did you answer in a similar way, with extended responses and objective ideas rather than personal experiences? If so, you're going to do well in this part. If you'd like more practice with IELTS speaking, head to e2language.com where you can find lots of practice materials as well as mock tests, assessments, and one-on-one tutorials. IELTS speaking can be challenging, but with practice, you'll be just fine. See you next time!